Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Books About BIPOC Joy, a conversation about diverse children's literature. I am joined by three of our amazing authors, David Anthony Durham from The Shadow Prince, Kelly J. Baptist from The Electric Sliding Kai, and Samara Cole Doyon from Magic Like That. And we are so happy to have you all here with us today. And today, I'm going to go over a little bit of the agenda. We'll all introduce ourselves, and then our authors are going to take you through their books. They'll provide a little synopsis and talk briefly about their inspiration behind writing the book. And then we'll hear from David about why books with BIPOC characters about joy are critical to kids' development. Then we'll transition over to Samara, who will talk about using books about joy alongside critical books about history and painful oppression. And then we'll conclude with Kelly, who's going to talk about using books with BIPOC characters about joy and childhood in the classroom or any other relevant educational setting. And then we will conclude with a question and answer. So we have a packed schedule today, and we are really excited to hear from everyone. And so my name's Katie Potter. I'm the Senior Literacy Specialist at Lee & Low Books. You may have seen me from webinars in the past. And I develop the teacher's guides and educator resources for Lee & Low. And I also work with universities, nonprofit organizations, and schools on incorporating diverse literature into their respective curricula. And then I was a former educator and literacy instructor, and I have my master's in general education and literacy from Bank Street College of Education. And now on to Samara.
Hi, I'm Samara. I like to tell people that I'm both a second generation Haitian American and a Mainer, and this is because in Maine, the population is overwhelmingly white. And so when you have brown skin here and people see you, they assume you must not be from here. But I like to remind people that Black and brown Mainers are here. We've been here. I am very proud to be Black, very proud to be Haitian, and I'm also a Mainer. But a lot of folks know me from my first children's book, Magnificent Homespun Brown. It got a bunch of starred reviews, which was exciting. And it also won an International Literacy Association Award. It won a Lupin Award, which is a Maine State Award. And then my co-creator, Kaylani Juanita, got a Coretta Scott King Honor for her illustrations in that work. And you can check me out and my books at samaracoledoyon.com.
Thanks, Samara. And on to David.
Okay, hello, and thank you all for being here. As mentioned, my name is David Anthony Durham. I'm the author of 7 books for grown-ups, as it says on my current book jacket. They've ranged from African-American focused literary historical novels to a couple of novels set in the ancient Mediterranean world about Hannibal of Carthage and the Spartacus Rebellion, and also an epic fantasy series, the Acacia Trilogy. I also write for The Wildcards, series of collaborative novels. It's edited by George R.R. Martin. That's a long-running series of sci-fi novels, kind of superhero and mutant stuff, but in prose form, with a number of authors writing together on it. Recently, I've been involved in the early development of a number of TV shows. Nothing I can talk about specifically yet, but it's been exciting so far, and hopefully some of those will make it to the screen in the next few years. I'm new to this particular space though, and super excited now to be a children's book author as well. My middle grade debut is The Shadow Prince. It pubbed yesterday. And I believe I'll get to say more about that in a moment. Lastly, I mentioned that I teach creative writing at the University of Nevada, Reno, and at the Stone Coast MFA program, which is a low residency program based in Maine. Both these are genre inclusive, and I loved working with students writing literary fiction, but also science fiction, fantasy, crime, historical, YA, and middle grade. That's me.
Nice. Thanks so much, David. And lastly, Kelly.
Hello and good afternoon to everyone. Congratulations to you, David. And and say yay, Maine, because that connection there. My name is Kelly J. Baptist, and I'm also from a M letter state, and it's Michigan. And so I've got to do the hand because everyone's like, well, where in Michigan? It's a very small town. So Southwest Michigan, right here on the lake, born and raised. Didn't think I would be back in this same town, but it's been such a blessing because I'm near family, right, for children and young adults. And I have 5 of my own at home who provide a lot of distraction, inspiration, noise. They have conditioned me to be able to write in chaos. So I'm a stronger writer because of them. Then I also work in a middle school as a social emotional learning interventionist. So I am pretty much surrounded by kids all day, every day. But it is an honor to serve them because truly, they are what we are looking forward to in the future.
Wow. Such impressive backgrounds from all 3 of you. And we are honored to have you here with us today and sharing your insights and expertise. And Kelly, let's transition into talking about the electric sliding Kai.
All right. So this is my first picture book, but 3rd overall book. And it is about a kid named Kai who comes from a family of dancers, but he did not get that gene and he cannot dance. And so he is always falling or spinning when you were not supposed to spin, dipping when there should have been no dip. And he is trying to get his moves right, very desperate to learn the electric slide before his aunt's wedding. Because as many of you know, that is a very popular dance that is done at wedding receptions. And so he wants to make sure he gets it right. He wants to get a dance nickname from his grandfather, which everybody else has except him. So we are journeying with Kai on that adventure to try to learn how to dance. And the inspiration for this story came from my daughter, whose name is Micaiah. A little inside hint, the story actually started off with Kai as a girl because it was inspired by my daughter. So we were at a wedding reception. My cousin had married an AKA, which is a sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha, Sorority Incorporated. And so his new bride was on the dance floor with her sorority sisters or her sorors. And they were strolling, and my daughter was about 5 at the time, and she's sitting on the sideline and she's just watching their every move and trying to copy it. And I did record a piece of that. I got to find the footage, but that sparked the idea to write about a kid trying to learn a dance that everybody else knows, but just can't get it right. So that's the inspiration for that story. I'm very excited about it. I love it. And my daughter is just in love with the fact that it was named for her.
I mean, what was she saying to her classmates? And I mean, I bet she was just the proudest kid.
Classmates and her siblings, like, mommy wrote a book with my book. So now I got to do one for them.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thanks so much, Kelly. And David, let's hear a little bit about the Shadow Prince. And congratulations again on the pub date.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm excited. Let me see. So this book is unique to me, obviously as my first middle grade, a first kids book, but also because it's the only book I can remember the exact day and moment that the idea for it came to me. It was a hot summer day in Western Massachusetts. I had just come inside and all sweaty from mowing the grass, sat down to cool off, and had the house to myself. I casually picked up a book from the coffee table. It was a book about Egyptian mythology that my son had borrowed from a neighbor. I began flipping through it. I've been fascinated with ancient Egypt for a long time, even taken a few Egypt history courses in college. But this day, I think because I knew that it was here out of my son's interest, everything that I read about the various gods and their shape-shifting forms and powers and their outsized personalities struck me as fun, humorous, somehow perfect for a middle grade book. Visually and tonally, I was seeing it's similar to the animated series Avatar, The Last Airbender, but in Egypt instead, and with magic. I started wondering, what if the god Ra, who passed through the sky every day as the sun, not only shone down the sun as we know it, but also gave a magical gift to the people of Egypt? It was a metaphor for solar power, but in this case, it could power ships that flew through the air, machines and factories, light sources, and fun things like floating skateboards and chariots. And the magicians could use sun-infused styluses to write magical spells and hieroglyphics. Basically, the whole world kind of instantly made sense to me. And from that, I found my character. He's a boy from a remote village far out in the desert who learns that because he was born on the same day as a prince of Egypt, he could, on his 12th birthday, journey to the capital and compete with other boys and girls with the same birthday to become the prince's shadow. That's his bodyguard, confidant, and hopefully a lifelong friend. And this can apply to princesses as well, and it will in future books. The testing includes a lot of demon fighting, as that's something that a shadow may need to do, as well as several days during which a different god arrives each day and whisks them away to a different place for a different type of challenge. We did each day of testing, the number of candidates dwindles, and for the most of the book, they think they're in a deadly competition, though there's notably no gore. Later, it's revealed that the candidates kind of mysteriously disappeared instead of died, and it's a lot more okay than they might have thought for a little while there. By the end of the book, we have a new Shadow Prince, as well as a host of other friends and enemies in place for future books. What I love about this as a series is that there's so much rich source material for new books. There are new gods to highlight each time with a new dastardly plot and the need for the kids to save Egypt over and over again. I do aim to educate about Egyptian mythology, but also definitely keeping things light and humorous. Solar power element will be developed throughout, portraying positive and exciting uses of renewable energy and having fun because it's infused with magic. And lastly, I eventually realized that I had created a Black and brown cast of characters in a unique culture all their own. These are kids finding themselves and forming bonds with new friends, setting out on adventures that I would have loved to have read and seen myself in as a young reader.
Thanks so much, David. And I can attest to how fast paced it is because I just did the teacher's guide and I couldn't put it down. So highly, highly recommend. And lastly, Samara, let's hear about magic like that.
Sure. So this book is really about a little girl being transformed into all of the powerful, magical, true versions of herself that her mother can imagine and create in her hairstyles. And I think for me, this book was conceived actually when I was expecting my second child, my son Cohen. And as I was preparing for his arrival, I thought I need to get my hair braided because I'm not that great at doing my own hair. I don't have the stamina, the parting and the twisting and the braiding. My arms get tired and anyway, so I reached out to a woman that I knew at McDonald, and she's just a very powerful, creative person. And she came to my home and she braided my hair and she greased my scalp. And it was just such a beautiful, intimate moment. And I felt like she just gave me this beautiful gift in preparing me for this next phase of my life. And it really got me thinking about how powerful and magical and intimate those moments in our community are. When you see someone who is, it might be your mother, it might be an auntie, it might be an uncle, it might be a friend or a hairdresser, but it's just such a beautiful experience. It's not just about the time and the minor inconveniences that we go through, both as the person who's braiding and the person who's getting the braids, but it's just a beautiful bond. And I feel like also beyond all of that our hair and our existence is just a reminder of how we are able to transform and transcend these preconceptions about who we are and these limitations that are placed on us. And these people who do hair, these hairdressers or these family members, these community members that pour into us with this care and this transformative power, they are the keepers of this power and of this magic of transformation. And so for me, when I'm reading a book about Black hair, or when I was writing this book, it's about that. It's about that transcendence and that transformation and the way that we as a community hold that together.
Mm. Really nice, Samara. Thank you. And I think the illustrations really evoke that. And you'll get to see some of the artwork from this beautiful book in a little bit. But we're going to hear from David first, who's really going to illustrate how books with BIPOC characters about joy are critical to young readers and their development. And he's going to talk a little bit about that and how we can, integrate these values into educational settings. And take it away, David.
Okay, I'll try to do that. I think mostly I'm going to start from looking at some of my own experiences and hope that tells a story that's useful as well. I'll start by noting that it hadn't fully occurred to me that I'd written a book about joy until it came up at our first marketing meeting with 2 books. I knew I'd written a book about Black and brown kids having adventures, scares, hurdles, triumphs, and friendships, all in a Black and brown world in which race isn't the defining struggle. But I had known, but almost forgot that I was kind of still processing how much I had not had books that did that in my childhood. I had books like that. So I was a really reluctant reader through elementary school, essentially. And some of the difficulty there was I was a shy kid, and I probably was going to be a slow to pick up reading in the first place. But also, I grew up in a predominantly white suburban neighborhood in which I was pretty much the only person of color in my grade, like every year. That creates a lot of highlight on me, a lot of tension, a lot of feeling of otherness. It did not make reading out loud in our reading group circles very easy for me. And also, I don't think I was seeing myself or being particularly excited about the things I was presented to read aloud. So it took me a long time to figure out that reading was going to be important to me. And then that changed. I don't exactly know who put this book in my hands, but I ended up with The Hobbit, and I was spending the summer with my dad in Trinidad, where he's from. My parents had split when I was younger. So there I am on the equator, in a very Black and brown country, very tropical, and I started to read about Middle Earth, and I fell into it, pretty hard and pretty quickly. I remember that one day, I might have been the first day, I read 30 pages, and that was like amazing. I'd never done that before. The next day I read 40 pages, and the next day I read 90 pages. And it was just such a big change in me. And as important as that was, I should point out that, all the things that were happening in those books were essentially exclusively white characters in white worlds. They were creative, imaginative worlds, but they did not include people like me or people like many other people on this earth. And I know that there's so many writers, science fiction, fantasy writers in particular, and others who had that same experience of reading those books and loving the adventures they were taking on, but also not seeing themselves there yet. And I'd ask folks to who are not BIPOC to imagine a childhood in which just about every classic kids book you could read didn't include people like them. Can you imagine that? And what effect would that have? And what does that say about your worth and potential to be heroes and do grand things? Still, I guess probably still struggling with that at some level. And on the other hand, there are very few books about people of color that I recall from my elementary years. And then in high school, I think it's kind of mostly books that did feature struggles with hardship, racism. Richard Wright's Black Boy will always be memorable to me and important. It's a really important work for me. But as the main book about the Black experience that I remember reading, there's the issue that in a lot of ways, in so many ways, that the experience Richard Wright was writing about was not my experience. And I had a different experience, but I'm in a classroom where, again, kind of all eyes turn to me when we start reading about the hardships of poverty and racism. And that was difficult to be in the eyes of the other students so much. I totally think all those books are super, super important. And ultimately, I want there to be just only more of them that explore our actual racial history and unpack it in as much as we can and in many ways as we can for everyone. But I just believe that those books, while they're essential, they can gain even more resonance when they're not the only stories being told. When kids especially can contrast the unfortunate things that have been with the exciting creative possibilities that can be as well. When kids can all feel freer to be included in the imaginative adventures that books can take them on. And certainly one of the most positive things I see in publishing these days is that it's suddenly and recently including a lot more diverse voices and characters in ways that means today's children don't have to have the same marginalizing experiences past generations did. This is good for BIPOC kids. It's good for white kids. And I want all kids to feel welcome in adventures like The Shadow Prince. And I think it's beneficial for all kids to spend time in other imaginative worlds. And for some, it's come spend time with these kids who are like you. For others, it's come and spend time with these kids who might not be quite as much like you, but they're having cool experiences. And you can and participate in that. I just think it's a fun way to get at broadening perspectives and just laying the groundwork for people as they grow and mature to be able to enter the world with broader perspectives. And increasingly as they get older, they have that foundation. But the fact that I wrote this whole book without kind of realizing, I think that I was writing this book, not just for my son and my daughter and for other kids, but I was still writing it for myself, I think, for the kid that I was, and for the book that I wished I'd had when I was younger. And I know that there's so many books out there now like that, and I hope we keep them coming.
Wow. Thanks so much, David. Those are such powerful points, and I think will resonate with a lot of our audience members and kids still until this day. There's still schools across the country where kids aren't able to see themselves in the books that they're handed. So we're continuing to do the work, and thank you for publishing a book like The Shadow Prince, where we can continue this. And so Samara is going to, kind of tie in some of the themes that David discussed. How can we use books about joy alongside books about oppression from the past? What does that look like when you're using them alongside each other? And how can we convey their equally meaningful themes and messages to young children?
Yeah, so this is a topic that's really important to me as someone who has worked in education as well as in education settings. I've taught preschool and kindergarten, and I've worked as an ed tech in elementary school at different levels. And I've noticed that a lot of people, I think, are hesitant to bring up those subjects about the systemic harm that a lot of marginalized groups have experienced. There's a hesitancy that it's going to cause bad feelings and cause conflict and, make things worse, as it were. The reality is, though, we're still living with the systemic harms, and we're not going to be able to change that or address that unless we really look at how we got here. So it is important to look at those things and talk about those things, talk about what really has happened and what is the real story of us, just as individual communities, but also on a larger scale. What does it mean to be part of this country, part of this world? So I think that is really important. I think those honest conversations are important. And on the other hand, if we just stop there, if we only talk about oppression, if we only talk about marginalization and systemic harm, then children are not going to walk away empowered to push back and to tear down those boundaries, because the message that we're giving children is, yeah, well, this is how people have treated us, and isn't that too bad? And that's not empowering. It's not helpful. So I think that it's important for them. Obviously, I want children to know that things like enslavement and redlining and segregation and police brutality, obviously I want them to know that those things are horrible and that they're morally wrong and disgusting and disturbing. I want them to understand that. But beyond that, I want children to understand, because they know that they know that they know that they are valuable, they're beautiful, they're strong, they're wise, they have something to offer the world as themselves, as individuals, and as members of these vibrant communities. If we come from a place of teaching joy and teaching celebration and teaching pride in who we are, then when we come to these things, when we come to enslavement, redlining, segregation, the reality that children take away isn't just people have treated us poorly and this is sad, but also look at who we are and look at how logically broken white supremacy is. So I want children to understand that it is absurd, it is morally wrong, but it's also absurd. And look at who we are. Look at who we are as a community, and look at our diversity and how beautiful this is. So that's really important to me, that children see that beauty and that strength. And then when we start by teaching from that place of joy and empowerment, then the message is really different. So for instance, as an example, if you wanted to talk about discriminatory hair practices and what Black femmes and Black and brown people in general have been through with having to cover their hair, or having to chemically treat their hair, or being excluded from professional settings or schools because of their hair growing naturally out of their head as it is. Instead of starting from the place of look how bad this is and look how wrong it is, because it is, if you start with a book like mine, if you were to start with Magic Like That, then you're starting from a place of look how powerful and look at how beautiful and look at how magical Black hair is and look how versatile it is. And then what children come away with isn't this idea that, oh, other people are looking at us and seeing that there's something wrong with our hair, so they're trying to get rid of it, they're trying to change it, they're trying to cover it. Children can understand when they start from a place of joy, look at how powerful our hair is, look at how amazing it is, and it's a threat. It's not that there's something wrong with us, it's that there's something wrong with the way people are perceiving us, and we ourselves are beautiful. So that's what I want children to see, and not just, like David was saying, it's not just for Black and brown children. It's what I want all children to understand when they're looking at themselves and they're looking at each other. I want them to approach this from a place of empowerment.
Wow, Samara, thank you so much. And I think all of your points really speak to how important it is that our libraries in early childhood, no matter how many books you have in your classroom or the size of your budget, that libraries need to be reflective of all kinds of kids and demonstrating BIPOC joy in the preschool, in daycare centers, where kids are gaining early literacy skills and the concepts of print. So thank you so much for emphasizing this and for providing that example about the Black hair, because I think that's really helpful for people to envision the flipping the script and starting with magic like that, and then progressing into teaching about the hair practices and the oppression and discrimination that's associated with them. So thank you so much. And I hope that Samara's points were helpful to all of you and how you're structuring your curriculum this year. And so we're going to conclude with Kelly in kind of tying this all together and talking about using BIPOC joy in the classroom, because as Kelly mentioned, she has a really cool job as an SEL interventionist, which is just a really unique position. And so we'd love to hear from you, Kelly.
All right. Well, I want to first piggyback on something David said, and that's children need to see themselves in books, and then they also need to see others in books. I think both are meaningful and help them to be well-rounded. And so we're adults, obviously. And a lot of times we do know what is best for kids, but in terms of selecting titles for your classroom or even your home, I'd encourage you to also come from what their interests and their desires, what they look like, and things that they're into, what that means to each child as you're making your selections. So you're thinking about, if you're in a school, your own personal district, what are some things that are unique to that district, and how can we provide books that highlight those things? So if you're in a coastal town, obviously, you might have some books that have to do with coastal towns or water, adventures at the beach, and things of that nature. I work in an urban school district, so titles that I select or want to expose my kids to will have those themes in them. You might see city buildings or adventures on a city playground, a basketball court, and things of that nature. And those are great because that is the I see myself reflected route that you will take. But then at the same time, kids in an urban district should also read about kids in suburban and vice versa. So you're really looking to see the needs of your district and the characteristics and the things that are unique, so that you can provide that mirror. And then you're also looking outside of where you are. I'm a small town, I'm a rural town, I'm a bustling city. Well, let's have some country and farm books as well, so that they get to see that experience what other children across the country are experiencing. So that would be my first suggestion, because I think it's very meaningful and helps kids to be well-rounded readers. And then next, the beauty of universal themes. So for example, with my book, The Electric Slide and Kai, every child has experienced learning something new, whether it's tying your shoe, learning how to say a word correctly, learning how to pick out your outfit so that it matches. Although these days it doesn't have to, because you're expressing yourself. But brushing your teeth, doing your own hair, all kids kind of go through this process of learning something new. And that's all that is happening in The Electric Slide and Kai. It's, when you whittle it down, it's a kid who wants to learn a dance, or a kid who feels a little embarrassed or feels like he's not as good as everybody else in his family. And I think that those are universal themes that will resonate with a wide audience of kids. And it has nothing to do with the color of his skin. So a kid can relate to that no matter what. So I would say to capitalize on the value of universal themes. And I added SEL in there because it's what I do. And also Lee and Lowe curates some very, very nice lists. And I actually use your list, as you know, in stocking my library here at my school. I went to the SEL list and already have been able to share a lot of those titles with students because they're relevant. There's one title, Chess Rumble by is it Neri or Neary?
Yep.
G. Neri. And I started sharing it with the 6th grade class because they were a rowdy bunch. And there's a particular scene in that book. It's a fight scene. And so you literally see one kid holding the other kid by the collar and his fist is cocked back. And so when we got to that chapter and I showed them the picture, everybody is instantly engaged and looking at, oh, he's about to hit him, oh my goodness. Because that's something that would happen from time to time, or something that is their default button. Okay, we're going to fight. We had this disagreement and we're going to fight. But by seeing that on the page, they were immediately engaged. And then we were able to have a good discussion afterwards of what led up to the fight. What could have been done to avoid the fight? How is this one wrong? How is that one wrong? And it just lent itself to really a great conversation with that 6th grade bunch. So when you're able to find things like that in titles, I definitely say to capitalize, because it gets them thinking in ways that they don't even realize, just because they saw, oh, it's a fight, or, oh, they're on a basketball court, things that they can relate to. Parent involvement, I feel is very necessary. It's needed. We can't do it on our own as a school. And I'm speaking from my personal experience. We have to have that family community involvement. So we can get that happening, or get parents involved by sending books home, or keeping parents updated on what we're reading and the different themes that are in there. So I've had teachers send emails home, hey, we've been having a lot of talking in class. So we're going to read this title. And if you want to check it out at your library, or if we're sending it home with the students, you guys can read that together. It just puts everybody more on the same page so that we can work together and parents know what we're doing here and can reinforce it, and vice versa. And then finally, to make sure the children's voice is being heard, you can highlight their favorites. So in your library, for example, David might like baking. And so that might be David's pick of the month. And that can go in a newsletter or something to go home. And that student feels empowered. You know, we're reading this book this month because it's my favorite. And we're going to talk about this and these themes in this book. At my building, we did a building-wide read of Ghost by Jason Reynolds last school year. And it felt just amazing to be able to walk down the hall and peek into different classrooms, and everyone is reading the same book. So now we're starting to have a common language where if I say this about track practice, or if I say this about the sunflower seeds that Ghost would eat, everyone knows what I'm talking about because everyone was reading the same title. So that's another good approach in terms of bringing it into the classroom and also connecting it with home.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, we've had a lot of success with doing one book, one school programs like that, where people will come to us and all of the different grades, K to 5, will be engaging with the same read aloud or same, collection of short stories. So that's a really great example. And you can really capitalize on bringing books about joy. That's a great opportunity to use books about joy in a program like that, if you happen to have it at your school or want to bring it to your school and advocate for it. So thank you all so much. We're going to hear from our authors at the end with some specific questions, but I wanted to go over some logistical details about the kinds of resources that we offer in conjunction with these books, and then also touch on a new list that Kelly had mentioned. We have a social and emotional learning list. And now with this webinar, we're launching our books about joy list. But first, we have teacher's guides for all of the books mentioned in this webinar today. And we also have teacher's guides for almost all of our books. So check them out on the book pages. When you're on our website, you type in the book name, and then you go to the book page and you can see the teacher's guide. And they have tons of discussion questions, interdisciplinary activities, background information, and more. And they don't prescribe to a lesson plan. They're flexible and adaptable, and they're free. So the books about joy, a diverse reading list. This one is really special to me and everyone at Leah Lowe, because this just highlights such beautiful, engaging stories that families, educators, librarians, kids can all enjoy. And so we divided this group into 3 different categories of joy, because we wanted to specify, kind of like how we do with our social and emotional learning list, where we have different themes and then the books are grouped by that theme. We wanted to group books by specific types of joy. So we have the joy of play, the joy of family and friends, and the joy of being ourselves. There are plenty more types of joy that you can have, but for brevity's sake, we kept it to just 3. And thinking about, I want to pose the question to everyone listening, as you select your next book, for whether you're sitting at home with your kids, or you're in school or in your library or wherever you teach, how can you include books about joy in your practice? How is this book celebrating a particular type of joy? Is it the joy of play, of family, of being yourself? So this is a little glimpse into the list. And then also there are some grade, it specifies the grade in a tag at the bottom, so you can know what age groups, and our books will apply to multiple age ranges and groups. So it's really whatever fits your needs best. And so that's a little bit about the books about joy list, and it goes from pre-K to grade to 8 and above. Wide range of genres and mirrors and windows, as always with our books. And then you can purchase the full collection on our website. And of course, the 3 books that were mentioned in the webinar today are also in the collection. So that's a little bit about books about joy, the joy list. And now we are going to segue into our question and answer section. So feel free to throw some questions into the Q&A. Some of you had some wonderful questions that you posed when you registered. So I'm going to start with those. And I'm going to actually start with Kelly to, continue the conversation that we had with families. This is actually a really nice question to pair alongside with your last note. How can you help families at home and building a home library? I know you touched a little bit about it, but I would love to hear more about what you do at school, or any kinds of techniques that you can offer to people listening today.
All right, I'll mix in a little bit of personal techniques having kids.
Yes, definitely.
And so I can come from that lens too, in terms of time. Number one, we're all busy and running around oftentimes, and then there's homework, and we're competing with video games and social media and that type of thing. But in terms of incorporating a really strong family library or a classroom library, you got to think outside the box. And what I mean by that is a physical book in your hand is not the only way to read a book. And that's something that I've learned. At first, I was not into audiobooks at all, because I'm like, that's not reading, you're listening to it. But it is a different way to get through books. And while I might not have as much time anymore to sit down and physically read with my children, one practice that we have is we listen to an audio book every single night. That is our segue into bedtime. Everyone will get into their beds. I will put a Bluetooth speaker in the hallway, and we'll just go through chapters of different books. And from that way, we have gone through a lot of books. I can just scroll through my Audible account and see all of the books that we have actually gotten through in that way. So that is a technique that I even encouraged here at school when we were reading Ghost. I told a few teachers, use my login, you can have it playing while students are reading through the story. Even those students, who might not be as strong of readers, they're still getting the content from the book and they can follow along, but they're also hearing it. And oftentimes it's amazing narration that brings the story to life in amazing ways. So that's something I would definitely suggest is thinking outside the box a little bit and maybe trying an audiobook. Because you're driving in your car, you can be playing it and listening and engaging and asking questions. At bedtime, my kids, when it stops, they're always like, no, one more chapter. I hear them from their rooms, one more chapter, please. And sometimes they'll fall asleep to it. So that's definitely a technique to use that I would recommend.
Wow, that is such a good, that's such a good tip. Mm-hmm. And you're, at home, you have a bunch of age ranges, same thing at school where, or whatever setting. So thanks, Kelly. I love that. No, we also I didn't mention this during the resources, but we have a Lee and Low home library questionnaire that we adapted from our popular classroom library questionnaire, and we can share it in the chat. But it's just questions for caregivers and families at home to think about the kinds of books that they're that are at home or that they're looking for in the library. It acts as sort of a guideline. It's in no way a checklist, but it's just gets you thinking about the different types of books that you can be looking for and sharing with your kids.
Well, Dorothy, real quick, I just want to, because I remember another thing I was going to say, to make it fun or to spur a different kind of discussion, you can select some titles that have been adapted into film. And read the book first, watch the movie, and then kind of discuss with your students or your kids at home what was the same, what was the difference, what plot was stronger, do you feel like they should have veered this way for the movie? And that can add some excitement to know you're reading a book, but next week when you're finished, you'll get to see the movie of that title. So
love that. That's great. Thanks, Kelly. Oh, that's a really good question. Let's see. Samara, let's get to you, and then David, I might ask you this question because it was really getting at what you were discussing during the first part of the presentation. So Samara, can you give some other books that you love about joy to our attendees, your go-to list?
Sure. I both love and dread this question because
I'm sorry.
there are so many great books, and it's like, okay, how do I? So I'm going to go ahead and share some, and other panelists, Kelly and David, please jump in and share, because they're especially over the past couple of years, like David was saying, the diversity of themes in publication has been really, really exciting and so important. So anyway, some books that we've really enjoyed in our home: Going Down Home with Daddy by Kelly Starling Lyons, illustrated by Daniel Minter. Ohana Means Family by Alima Loomis and Kennard Pak. And again, if I completely butcher the pronunciation of someone's name, please someone jump in and correct me. It doesn't hurt my feelings. I really want to get names correct. I really love, and my daughter and I actually both really love this one, Eyes That Kiss in the Corners by Joanna Ho, illustrated by Young Ho. Fry Bread, A Native American Family Story by Kevin Noble Millard, illustrated by Juana Martinez Neal. And then a couple of just like activism books that are that I found empowering and beautiful: We March by Shane W. Evans, and We Are Water Protectors, of course, by Carol Lindstrom and illustrated by Michaela Godey. So yeah, I also really love the ABCs of Black History by Rio Cortez, illustrated by Lauren Semmer.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's so many. And of course, I have to plug, my first book, Magnificent Homespun Brown, a lot of joy in that book. But there's so many, and I'm sure that both Kelly and David can jump in and share.
Yeah. Thanks, Samara. Those are great suggestions. Kelly and David, do you want to mention any? Your faves?
Hair Love.
Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
I love Hair Love, especially, seeing Samara's, but can't wait to get that one too. But just like we know what it is to deal with Black hair as a woman. And so to see that illustrated, to see a father struggling to try to help do his daughter's hair, and that's Matthew Cherry and illustrated by Vashti Harrison. I love that one, and a lot of joy in that book. And there's a short as well, video short. So it kind of goes back to my suggestion. You compare those two, read the book, watch the short, and you get a lot more information about the story by watching the short. So that is my spot.
I have to really quickly plug books so we have the Confetti Kids series, if we also want to throw that in the chat. It's an early chapter book series designed for kindergarten through second grade. And it is one of the few early chapter book series that features BIPOC kids. So that one is super near and dear to my heart. Also, my 20-month-old will sit through the entire chapter book. There is something about it that just draws him in, and he just loves to see kids. And it just shows that when you show kids having fun and enjoying the daily, the pleasures of daily life, it truly makes an impact. So check out Confetti Kids. Sorry to interrupt, David. If you wanted to mention some of your favorites.
That's all great. I'm inclined to mention just one writer who certainly writes for adults, but also writes for somewhat younger readers as well. Nnedi Okorafor is an absolutely wonderful fantasist, has YA books as well as books for adults. Or something.
Nnedi Okorafor. Okay.
Nnedi Okorafor.
Nnedi.
Yes.
Okay.
Nnedi. Yes, please look her up if you haven't read her. She's fantastic.
That's great, especially for fantasy lovers.
Yes.
In the group. So David, this question is really fascinating, and it applies to what you were talking about for your high school experience and in a way. Do you think there's a new or different kind of BIPOC joy found in middle high school classrooms versus elementary? I'm kind of changing the question a little bit, but versus elementary school. Do you find that there are more picture books that represent BIPOC joy as opposed to what's being presented in middle and high schools?
I'm not sure that I'm equipped to answer that. My mind is flashing back to all the many picture books and the various stages of books that we had for our kids. And yeah, I'm not entirely sure.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Some of the others might jump into that better than I.
Well, I guess I can transition into a question that's a more general question about your experience and about connecting it to other kids. How can we encourage educators, families, librarians, whoever's listening, that books about joy are important and critical to libraries? I know you touched upon this before, but if you could speak to that a little bit more before we conclude, that would be great.
Okay. It's first place my mind goes is to have sympathy for people who want to promote diverse books in communities not inclined to welcome that. There's clearly a lot of fear among some people that discussions of race and prejudice and things about other people are harmful and maybe encourage discord in general. I don't agree with that, of course. And there's so much to discuss there. In terms of books like the ones we're discussing today and things focused on joy, it's kind of simple, but I think these books invite readers, whoever they are, into them. I think that's really valuable and hard to deny. That's a bad thing. They don't push them out. They don't judge. There's plenty of need for that in different contexts. People should look in the mirror sometimes, ask the harder questions. But I think books like ours for young readers, they're asking them to come and meet us, to see the normal, the loving, the fantastical, things in our real and imagined worlds. I think they welcome some readers with kids and experiences that they can immediately relate to, which is great. And for others, they introduced them to new friends and new perspectives gently. I think it's a way to put them in homes they may not choose to go into otherwise, and introduce them to friends they might not have known they would have. And through that, I think kids are less scared of each other. And that going forward is something we really, really need. So it's that way of equipping young readers with imagined experiences that can give them broader perspectives in the real world. And I don't know, to me, that's an undeniably good thing. And I hope it's one that's hard to argue with, especially when the books that are doing it are fun and welcoming. That's
exactly.
yeah.
Well, I think that's a great, Samara and Kelly, do you want to add anything before I go on? But I think that's a great place to conclude and share everyone's social media and websites. So please check out our authors. These are all their websites and social media handles. And you can also check out our Bebop catalog if you're still searching around, perusing for back to school, and even for next school year, planning ahead. And you can also follow us on social media. These are all of our social media channels, and also our blog at the end, where we feature many articles with author interviews and educational applications, etc. And I forgot to mention actually at the beginning that this webinar is being recorded, and the link to view the webinar, the diverse reading list with books about joy, will be shared within 1 week of the webinar. So stay tuned. It might not be for a few days, or most likely next week, but just keep an eye out and it'll be coming. And then you can always contact me, kpotter@leonlowe.com, for a certificate of completion if you need that. And that's my contact information. I love to hear from everybody. Please reach out and say hello. So thank you all so much. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you again for taking the time to share your incredible insights, expertise, and knowledge with us. So we are very grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was so great I'm just honored to be on this panel with Kelly and David, and it's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.